This week we will be drawing non-elliptical still lifes. But before we get to those, let's kind of rehash some things that we learned last week about ellipses. And we're going to start with spheres, which is kind of taking ellipses to the next step and creating three-dimensional balls. So here I'm doing a cross contour, as you can see, like a globe, but it's kind of floating in space, kind of like the Death Star or Earth or any planet. Now I'm going to work in charcoal here, as you can see, and I'm trying to show all the layers of the shadows. So you've got the core shadow on the ball itself. You've got the cast shadow on the surface it's sitting on. You can see the reflected light underneath the ball, a little smidge of light. I'm going to show that in the next two balls I draw as well. Kind of allows you to really see that there's a curvature there. The brightest point is the highlight, the part that I leave absolutely white. And you can see I'm drawing these shadows from different directions because their light sources are coming from different directions. So the first one that I did in charcoal, it was coming from the upper right, and then the lower left is for the basketball here, and then the last one is this baseball I'm going to draw. And the light there is coming directly down from above, which is kind of like the sun at noon. And you can see I've had a complete transitional level of value from black to white. And I encourage you to use a value finder or make your own value finder, print one out to see your scale. But use this method, both the cross contour and then also the value, adding value to create this dimension of form and depth. And so I'm going to do a still life that I actually started last week. So it's got a few ellipses in it. And here I'm just going to show you how to do a cross contour still life. I am going to add value to it in the end, but in a cross contour way, and but keep it mostly lines. So I'm going to be working in ink. So when you work in ink, it's best to start out with some pencil lines. Try to keep them light as possible, so that you can go in and pick out the exact best line that you like after you've done some sketching with the pencil. And so that's what I'm doing here, going in and getting that best line I can for each and every one of these Jenga blocks. So I decided to do this still life because I've been playing a lot of games lately. The still life was actually quite difficult because of the Chinese checkers, the Jenga blocks. Trying to get the Chinese checkers lined up, I redrew this several times and erased and redrew it, and so still not quite happy with it. But here I am adding vertical lines, kind of show that it's box, and curved lines here on the hourglass timer. Here, kind of revisiting the ellipses of a cylinder for the Yahtzee cup, and also revisiting cubes that we did at the beginning of the semester on the dice. And here I'm coming in with a lighter gray marker to kind of show my cross contours. I'm using my cross contours on these blocks in a way so that I can also show which side has the darkest value, which side has your mid-tone, and which side actually has the highlight, which is hitting the light the hardest. And so this is all I'm really looking for in your cross contour still life. It doesn't have to be shaded in. You can add detail. I'm adding a little detail. Always kind of pick your detail wisely. And here's the part I'm dreading, the marbles of the Chinese checkers game. Drew them several times, And I'm going to want to come back to those a little bit later and show the highlights and shadows. So here I'm drawing in the cast shadow of everything because there's a nice hard light in the afternoon on this still life. And coming in now and drawing in the shadow side of the marble and leaving the highlight white. Trying to keep that as consistent as possible so the light looks all like it's coming from the same direction. And going in, adding some final details in the cast shadows of the marbles and putting in a little shadow in the Jenga blocks just to make them pop out and have a little bit more contrast from one another. And so, that's essentially a still life in cross contour. What I'm looking for, and if you take it a little further and add some shadow, that's well appreciated too. So here we're going to take it the sphere one step further and make it a little bit more organic. And we're going to work on these three apples here in a chiaroscuro kind of style. And so chiaroscuro is a artistic tool essentially developed during the Renaissance, and it translates from Italian to dark and light. Or light and dark actually. Chiaro meaning light and scuro meaning darkness. And so in this attempt, I'm going to have a really nice highlight and a dark black background. So I'm working here in charcoal, filled in my background first, and coming in, and so I started with that compressed charcoal to kind of get a nice level gray, and coming in now with my charcoal pencils, which are a bit darker, and pulling out my shadows. I pull out my highlights with the eraser, so you can see there's reflected light on the bottoms of the apple, highlights along the top corner. And this kind of helps separate them. And I'm doing all of my shadow lines with the cross contour, leaving space out for the stems to catch a highlight and a shadow, so there's a dark side and a light side of those stems. And kind of just getting in here and blending it in with the nib. I try to use the nib very sparingly. Otherwise, the nib can start to flatten things out. I only do it to kind of just blend some of my tones together. I also use it to kind of just get compressed charcoal into the paper. So another kind of more organic shape you could be working with is our flowers and plants. So here's a photograph of some orchids that I saw last year this time when I took a trip to Key West. And so I'm going to start by actually drawing in with compressed charcoal the negative space. Get that in. And I'm going to come in with my nib and kind of just blend it all in so it kind of fills into the gaps of the tooth of the grain of the paper. And now I'm going to come in and pull out the show where all the stems are, and then also define the contour of the leaves at the bottom, and just kind of basically pulling out the dark and pulling out the light, and one thing I will really push you to do is to push your darks, to really give it some pressure and coverage. So here with this drawing, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm trying to keep this a quick drawing, and I'm looking at the general shapes. Flowers, you can get really lost into the detail, and here I'm just trying to show a general shape of something that maybe you could put in the back of the background of your still life, or you could actually make the centerpiece of still life itself. You could do as I did here, make a solo one object, which is actually filled with lots of objects with all the petals. All right, so moving on to the next still life, we're going to focus on just a single object, but here I'm going to cover the, so this boot, and I'm showing you a profile view of the boot. But so for this one, I'm going to completely cover the page with the compressed charcoal, and now I'm going to come back with the eraser and pull out all of my highlights. So this is subtractive drawing essentially. And allows me to have a nice gray midtone and then add dark and add light on top of it. And I find this is a great way to get your negative space finished quickly. Also, it makes a nice even negative space. So remember with the apples, I kind of had this halo of a background where I was still kind of drawing around it, and where here now the background is laid in. The midtones of the boot are already laid in, and so here I'm just now adding the darkening the background even more to give it more contrast and push it out to the front even more. But giving it a surface to stand on and a wall behind it, showing that with a little cross contour. And I showed you this boot because at profile, because the next drawing that I'm going to do is of some shoes that are actually coming towards you. So they have to be foreshortened. And the idea of foreshortening is kind of compressing the image anytime it's aimed your direction. So here I'm going to work with marker, and I'm going to do very similar. I'm going to do the, as I did with charcoal, but here I'm just going to do the negative space, fill that in first. This photograph had both cool and warm tone grays in it. The shoes are kind of more warm tone with a khaki and tan, whereas the cement is a cooler tone. And when I say cool and warm, I'm saying that there's a hint of blue in the grays of the cool tones, and there's a hint of orange in the warm tone grays. So when I'm going to start this with ink, working with markers and pens, and then I'm going to come back with my Prismacolor pencils because they have both a warm gray and a cool gray. Here you see I kept it really loose and very gestural sketches, keeping that line constantly moving, a light cross contour just to give this illusion of shape. And here I am going back over all of the ink with colored pencil. This kind of allows me to smooth out my details, kind of give a more of a texture of fabric. Come in and I'm actually adding a little bit of white pastel to the cement. And as you can see here, just coming in and darkening my shoelaces, kind of bringing out some shadows and bringing out some of the other details. And then, as you can see, the final version darkened shadows and added some more lines on the surface to show its setting. Next still life, I'm going again completely cover the background. I'm going to do this twice in both directions, and I kind of clean it off with a Kleenex. This allows to get all the powdery excess off. You don't need it. And then I come in and sketch out this guitar. And as you can see, I've started erasing where the highlights are going to be, where it's white and really bright. And so this, again, allows me to have more control over my value range. And by doing that, I am more likely to get to an honest black, and I'm able to kind of see where my highlights are a lot better because I have to pull them out. rather than leave them be. So, the subtractive method of drawing um, is great, but I like to combine both subtractive and additive. So I like to have a nice mid-gray tone. If you're working on a gray sheet of paper or a tan paper, you've already got it kind of laid out. But in times of quarantine, when you're not able to get to the art supply store, you can make your own gray paper this way really easily. So as you can see, I've gone in now with my really soft charcoal pencil and bringing out the dark side, the blacks, the shadows inside the F hole there, and trying to show that along the edges of the guitar are black, really dark black, and they're actually going to fade towards the center, kind of like this sunburst fade of gradients. But I'm going to show that just through value. I use the Kleenex also to kind of keep from smudging. I try not to touch the paper, but sometimes it's good to just leave that in there. Never know when your wrist will run across. Another suggestion is work from top to bottom, or from top left to bottom right, if you're right-handed, or vice versa if you're left-handed, and so that you aren't going back over with your hand touching the paper. But as you can see here, now I'm pulling out the strings with an eraser, and I'm coming in and adding shadows underneath and along beside it. And I used my ruler to get that straight line with the eraser. Come in and darken the shadows in the background, just to make the guitar pop out a little bit more, but not too dark, so it doesn't really compete too much with the dark black that I pulled out in the guitar itself. And I come back with the eraser and pull out a little bit more highlights, and just clean up my edges. Use the nib just a little bit to kind of soften that background, and there you have it. So the next still life happens to be using all of the art supplies that I've been doing these demos, what I have for this class. So you can see I've got markers, colored pencils, charcoal, graphite pencils, a pencil sharpener, two kinds of tape, a ruler, and some Kleenex. So this one's right here on my drawing table. I didn't have to go far or move anywhere to draw this one. Set it up right here with very little kind of change to it, because it's how I like to keep my supplies set up while I'm drawing. All right, so coming in and getting my contour lines laid out. I'm doing this part in graphite. I'm also going to work with charcoal, and I don't suggest using both graphite and charcoal too much. I'm only going to try to bring the charcoal in to darken up some areas and actually leave those areas untouched. But charcoal doesn't go over graphite very well. I will be doing some mixed media pieces. I find that graphite works on top of marker. Colored pencil and graphite also work on top of marker. Charcoal, however, doesn't go over top of graphite very well. In the same respect, colored pencil doesn't go over top of graphite very well. So sometimes I'll sketch it out and I'll erase it so that the graphite or the colored pencil can go directly onto the paper. But here I'm adding charcoal in my negative space and my dark areas, and I haven't gone in and used graphite there. So it's kind of a little bit of a mixed media. More of my details and my contour was done with the pencil, and then all of my dark shadows, both cast shadows and core shadows, are being done with the charcoal here. All right, and so and you get kind of a good idea of how to make a composition that fills the page, also kind of directs your eye back through the page um, with kind of two different directions of perspective, one leading you out the window and the other one leading you out to the side. Um, and kind of finish it up, pull out my last highlights and darken in my shadows. And see, I've got that black, I've got that white, and there's all these grays in between. But I really encourage you to have both the black, the white, and try to get as many midtones, gradients as much as possible. So one of the best parts of, or the high, I guess one good thing about this quarantine I can say is I've gotten to spend a lot more time with my dog. Um, so this is the pillow that Louis likes to sleep on. It's right next to the radiator, and it's underneath the window. You can see how the window blinds have kind of cast a shadow within the cross contour. So I went over there next to the window where he usually sleeps, and I drew out my setting, kind of the cross contour perspective lines of my floor and my wall, which allows me to really kind of focus this drawing on the pillow itself, because I'm doing this drawing because I want to show you how to draw fabrics, anything that's the lines are not straight whatsoever, and also kind of show you the cross contour method of realizing those window blinds across this very rugged surface, almost kind of like mountains. So you come in here, I'm doing this all with ink and just getting in lots of darks, going in with a full black and just pulling out as much dark. It's very, you can go too dark and I can come back later with a colored pencil and lighten it up. Also trying to show all the highlights, filling in my back wall, um, and the baseboards there. And then even going in and adding a little detail with my fine tip pen of the radiator, using the ruler as a guide to kind of get accurate lengths on those little openings. And trying to show a little bit of the direction of the tile, but really trying to focus on this pillow, because this pillow's quite a difficult thing to attempt. Anything with kind of folding fabric, you need to think about how your highlights are hitting the surfaces that are closest to you or closest to the light, and how you're also showing the shadows underneath the folds. And so you can see I've come in and I've really started to work on that cast shadow of the pillow. And the shadow has an umbra, which is right underneath, and then a penumbra, which is the gray area all the way stretching out from it. And then even past that, there's the antumbra, that antumbra that is kind of this haze that you'll see here. And so I've gone over completely with colored pencil and really kind of smoothed out the surfaces so it feels a lot more like fabric. And that's the kind of the great thing about working with a colored pencil over top of the ink. So I'm also going to draw his toys that he likes to play with. I arranged them a little bit. He keeps them in this little bed of his. He doesn't sleep in the bed. He sleeps on the pillow. But here are his toys, and I kind of arranged them so that they make a more fulfilling still life, I guess. Kind of present his loot to you. So I'm going to do this one with ink. And I'm going to start dark, filling in my darkest shadows first. I've lightly laid this out in pencil, but I'm only using like an HB pencil and just lightly pressing before I go in with my ink. So here I'm going to kind of lay everything out, but I'm laying it all out through shadow. And I'm going to try to build this whole drawing on shadow. So now I'm working down to like a 70%, 80% gray, and then a 50% gray. But right now I'm going with my second gray tone. That's the kind of like an 80 to 70% gray. Doing that next, and then after that I'll come in with like a 40-50% gray. I forgot to add the shadow inside the donut hole. And here I'm going to kind of bring out that shape of the donut through little cross contour, curved lines for my shadows. These toys are kind of elliptical here, and so think of them as multiple spheres kind of on top of each other that have been kind of squished, and the little basketball is also spherical. Come in and really start to, now I'm adding some shadows along the floor, and the reason I'm doing that is just kind of give it a surface to sit on, and kind of direct your eyes back into the center of the still life. And now I'm coming back with colored pencil, and I can pull out the sprinkles on the donut with the colored pencil. The great thing is the white and the light grays colored pencils easily can go right on top of ink. And then smoothing out and adding a little bit more shadow. You know, the more that you push that shadow, the more your objects are going to feel real. And so really, you know, put a little oomph into it. Put some power, put some strength into darkening your drawing, and look at your value scale. You know, is your value scale only going up to 50%, or are you going all the way to black? And or you know, I usually don't have a problem with anyone drawing too dark. That's not usually the issue. Also, when you're composing your still life, like I have here, you know, fill the page. Let things run off the page. Don't try to fit everything in the middle of the page, real small. You know, take things off of each edge. Take things off the corners. If you don't have something going off one corner or edge, use lines like the tile lines or even shadows to kind of direct your eye. Now I'm smoothing out that shadow so that there's that cast shadow there, so it's darker right closer to the base, and it fades out a little bit. Adding a little bit more textural shadows to the bed, trying to show you know, the different fabric textures, so the inside clearly feels a lot softer than the outside surface, and trying to kind of emulate each texture of each object itself. So those are my examples. I'm going to now show you some examples of student work from previous semesters. So here's a great example of cross contour. Just adding, this is all I'm looking for the first sketchbook assignment. The second one, I'm going to want you to, or the second two sketchbooks, I'm looking for you to add value, and I don't need to see the cross contour so much as I am looking to see that you're drawing in that direction. So these still lifes here were done in class, and these ones were timed, usually anywhere from 10 or 20 minutes. So these early ones, these first ones, usually 10 minutes. And I encourage you to do that as an exercise before you start on the homework that you're going to turn in. Do quick sketches to lay out your composition. Look at your composition before you invest too much time into it. Are you too close? Are you too far away? Is it too high up? Did you lay it out correctly? Does it feel like it's all sitting on the same plane? Those are things you need to ask yourself. And then, really, sometimes it's best to kind of squint your eyes and look at the dark and find that and pull that out, both your core shadows on the objects themselves and then the cast shadows on the surfaces that they're sitting on. And also bringing out your highlights too. So, what I'd like you to do this week is to arrange some more still lifes in your house, and but make them objects that are not cylindrical, not elliptical. You can have a couple objects that are, but for the most part, I'm looking for you to look for anything organic, anything that's uniquely shaped. Not like a cup or a saucer. So here are some still lifes that in the kind of the chiaroscuro project that I usually have students do, and they do it on black paper, and it's a subtractive drawing. So they're working with the white charcoal or white Conte, and they're adding all of the light rather than drawing the dark. Here they're doing the opposite. They're pulling the light out of the black, and you can also work on like a tan surface for this kind of project. If you don't have any access to black paper, which I suspect you do, not have any opportunity to get black paper at the moment. So the best solution is to try covering your paper completely with charcoal, um, and work in reverse on one of your drawings. I think you'll find this rewarding. You'll find that you'll have a much richer um, range of values, and you'll have a lot more contrast, especially with a nice dark background. Um, Also, think about how you're going to light your objects, from which direction, but also think about choosing one intense direct light hitting one side of your object so that it's more dramatic. Kind of this chiaroscuro style that I was discussing earlier is really characteristic of it is having a strong highlight, but having a mostly black, a dark background, deep, rich black shadows, both core shadows on the surface that create the form, and then the cast shadow on the table or whatever your objects are sitting on. If you have questions this week, please send me an email. I'm looking forward to seeing what you put together. Try to also consider what the objects are saying to one another, and what they're saying about you, and how you arrange them to be the most dynamic, and do they need to be dynamically placed, or is it something that could be a little bit more static, kind of like the apples that I started in the beginning of this demo. Um, and then number one, I really push you to loosen up and have more fluidity, and kind of a continual line in your drawing, um, and also to push your black as much as you can. I can't stress that enough. It will really make your drawing pop. So push not just the black, but also push those highlights. Those highlights are going to is what's going to make your drawing shine. So good luck, and again, email me if you have any questions.